Her ex took everything in the divorce, but forgot the stone cottage her father hid in her name. What she found there wasn't just a place to live. It was the truth that would finally set her free. If you've ever felt like your world has been pulled out from under you, and you're looking for a sign that it's not over, then stay with me for this. And if you feel a connection to this journey, consider subscribing. It means more than you know to know we're not alone in these things. The key to my old life turned in the lock for the last time with a flat, metallic sigh. It was a sound of finality, the kind that echoes in the hollow space where your heart used to be. I dropped it onto the polished floor of the empty apartment lobby, right on the pristine marble where Mark and I had once posed for a picture, him dipping me in a theatrical embrace, both of us laughing. The doorman, a kind man named George who had seen me come and go for 5 years, just gave me a sad, knowing nod. He didn't need to ask. The single cardboard box in my arms, holding a few sentimental trinkets Mark's lawyer had deemed worthless, said everything. Worthless to them, maybe. To me, they were the last artifacts of a life I no longer recognized. My reflection in the gleaming brass of the elevator doors was a stranger's, a pale, drawn woman with eyes that seemed too big for her face, swimming in a quiet sort of shock. This was rock bottom. It didn't feel like a dramatic crash. It felt like a slow, silent descent into a deep, cold body of water. You don't even realize you're drowning until the light from the surface is just a distant, shimmering memory. Upstairs in what used to be our apartment, silence was an accusation. Every room was a ghost. The walls were scarred with pale rectangles where our paintings had hung. The air, scrubbed clean by the professional cleaners Mark had hired, smelled of lemon and bleach, a sterile scent that failed to cover the phantom smells of his cologne or the Sunday morning pancakes I used to make. He had taken everything of value. The furniture, the art, the joint savings account he'd systematically emptied over the last 6 months. He'd even taken the dog, a golden retriever named Gus that I had picked out from the shelter. His lawyer called it the equitable distribution of assets. I called it theft, sanctioned by a court that saw a marriage as a business merger and a divorce as its dissolution. My signature on the settlement papers had been a tremor, my hand guided by the exhausted resignation of my own lawyer, a woman who had told me, "Sometimes, Alara, the best you can do is walk away with your skin." I walked away with my skin and a box of photographs. It didn't feel like a fair trade. I sat on the floor in the middle of the living room, the late afternoon sun slanting through the floor-to-soiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. This was the view I had loved. The one that stretched across the city skyline, a glittering tapestry of other people's lives. Now it just felt like a monument to my failure. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a harsh, intrusive sound. I ignored it. It was probably another email from his lawyer, another digital paper cut to add to the collection. I leaned my head back against the wall and closed my eyes, trying to remember who I was before him. The girl who had loved hiking, who painted terrible watercolors of sunsets, who believed in things like forever. She felt like someone I'd read about in a book a long time ago. The buzzing persisted. Annoyed, I finally pulled the phone out. The caller ID was a number I didn't recognize, an area code from somewhere rural, somewhere green and forgotten. I almost declined. But some flicker of instinct, or maybe just the sheer boredom of despair, made me answer. "Is this Alara Vance?" The voice on the other end was male, older with a dry, papery quality like old legal documents. "It is," I said, my own voice raspy from disuse. "My name is Arthur Davies. I was your father's attorney. I know this is likely a difficult time for you. I was sorry to hear about your divorce." The mention of my father was a jolt. He'd been gone for 3 years. A sudden heart attack that had stolen the one person in the world I felt truly understood me. "Mr. Davies, I remember you from the funeral, thank you. I'm not calling to offer condolences, Ms. Vance, though you have them," he said, his tone all business. "I'm calling about a piece of unresolved estate business, a small matter your father arranged some years ago. It was structured to remain dormant until certain conditions were met." I frowned, trying to process his words through the fog of my grief and exhaustion. "I don't understand. His estate was settled years ago. There wasn't much. My father had been a high school history teacher. He'd left me his books, his beat-up sedan, and a modest life insurance policy that Mark had convinced me to invest in his can't-miss tech startup, which had promptly missed." "Correct," Mr. Davies said. "The public-facing estate was. This is something different. It was a blind trust set up for your benefit. The asset within it was legally transferred to your sole ownership on your 25th birthday. But the trust itself remained sealed as per your father's instructions." It was designed to be completely firewalled from any marital entanglements you might find yourself in down the line. It was never an asset you shared, so it would not have appeared on any financial disclosures during your divorce proceedings. It is and always has been yours and yours alone. My breath caught in my throat. A secret. My father, a man of simple habits and predictable routines, had kept a secret. An asset? What kind of asset? There was a rustle of paper on his end. A property. A small stone cottage and 5 acres of land in a place called Crest. He purchased it 15 years ago. The deed is here in my office, along with a key and a letter he left for you, Haven's Crest. The name was unfamiliar, a whisper from a place I'd never been, a cottage. The image that flashed in my mind was quaint, charming, something out of a fairy tale. It was so at odds with the sterile, empty room I was sitting in. A spark of something I hadn't felt in months, curiosity, ignited in my chest. Why wouldn't he have told me? I asked, the words barely a whisper. I believe his letter will explain that far better than I can, Mr. Davies replied, his voice softening slightly. He was a very deliberate man, your father. He thought I'd several moves ahead. Now there is a practical matter. The property taxes have been paid automatically from a fund he established, but that fund was depleted last year. There is a delinquency notice. About $2,000 are owed. If you want to keep it, you'll need to settle that with the county clerk. $2,000. It might as well have been $2 million. The divorce had left me with a mountain of legal debt and an empty bank account. The irony was brutal. A secret inheritance I couldn't afford to keep. I don't have that kind of money, Mr. Davies, I said, the spark of curiosity sputtering out, replaced by the familiar ache of hopelessness. I understand, he said calmly. The alternative would be to sell. The land alone is probably worth a modest sum, even with the delinquent taxes. It would give you a small cushion to start over. I can arrange for a local realtor to assess it. Sell it, the logical, sensible thing to do. Take the money and find a tiny apartment somewhere. Start the slow, painful process of rebuilding from zero. But it felt wrong. It felt like betraying a final gift from my father. A gift I hadn't even known existed until 10 minutes ago. A lifeboat, he'd called it. A lifeboat I couldn't afford to climb into. Can you mail me the key? I asked, the decision forming on my lips before my brain had fully caught up. And the letter. I need to see it first. I need to go there. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him weighing the practicality of my request against the unstated emotion behind it. Of course, Ms. Vance, he finally said. I'll have them messengered to you tomorrow morning. The address is on the deed. It's quite remote. Be prepared for that. After we hung up, I stayed on the floor, the setting sun painting the empty walls in shades of orange and bruised purple. A cottage, a key, a letter. My father, a man I thought I knew completely, had built a secret harbor for me, a place to weather a storm he had somehow seen coming long before I ever felt. The first drop of rain. For the first time in a year, I wasn't just looking at the wreckage of my past. I was looking at a map, faint and uncertain, to a place I'd never been, a place that might, just might, be a future. The next morning, a courier delivered a thick manila envelope. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a heavy, old-fashioned iron key, cold and solid in my palm. There was a folded, brittle-looking deed with my name, Alara Jean Vance, typed in stark black ink, and beneath it a smaller, sealed envelope of heavy cream-colored paper. For Alara was written on the front in my father's familiar slanted handwriting. I held it, but I didn't open it. Not yet. That felt like something that needed to be done in the right place, his place. The decision was a leap of faith fueled by desperation. I spent the next 2 days liquidating what little I had left. The box of trinkets I had guarded so fiercely was the first to go. I sold a silver locket from my grandmother, a first edition book I'd treasured since college, a small collection of vinyl records. I took my laptop, my phone to a pawn shop, trading my connection to the digital world for a handful of cash. It was a brutal, humbling process, stripping away the last vestiges of my former self. Each transaction felt like a small death. By the end, I had a little over $2,500 in cash, a worn duffel bag with a few changes of clothes, and the keys to my father's old sedan, the one asset Mark hadn't bothered to fight for. It was enough, it had to be. The drive out of the city was a slow, deliberate exorcism. With every mile, the skyscrapers and noise and the suffocating weight of my memories began to recede in the rearview mirror. I watched the skyline shrink until it was just a jagged line on the horizon, then nothing at all. The concrete arteries of the interstate gave way to 2-lane state highways that wound through sleepy towns and rolling farmland. The world turned from shades of gray to vibrant green. I drove for hours, The only sounds, the hum of the engine and the classic rock station my dad had always listened to. I imagined him beside me in the passenger seat, tapping his fingers on the dashboard, a quiet, reassuring presence. For so long I had felt his absence as a void. Now it felt like a guidance. He was leading me somewhere. As the sun began to dip low, the landscape changed again. The gentle hills became steeper, the forest darker and thicker, with pine and ancient oak. The road narrowed, twisting and turning through the mountains. My phone had lost service an hour ago. I was navigating by a folded paper map I'd bought at a gas station, a relic from another time. The town of Haven's Crest, when I finally found it, was little more than a crossroads. There was a post office, a general store with a single gas pump out front, a small cafe with a flickering neon sign, and a handful of houses. It was the kind of place people passed through, not a place they stop. It felt quiet, peaceful, and profoundly lonely. I pulled up to the general store, the bell above the door chiming as I entered. An old man with a weathered face and kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Help you with something?" he asked. "I'm looking for a property," I said, my voice feeling loud in the quiet store. "Blackwood Cottage. Do you know it?" His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Haven't heard that name in years. That's Old Man Miller's place, or it was. He passed on some time ago. It's been sitting empty ever since. You family?" "He was my father," I said, the words feeling strange and new. The man's expression softened. "Well, I'll be. He was a good man, kept to himself mostly, but he was always fair. Came up a few weekends a year for a long while." Said the peace and quiet helped him think. He gave me directions, his words simple and clear. "Down the main road, left at the old oak tree struck by lightning, then follow the dirt lane until it ends. Road's not been maintained," he warned. "Go slow." The dirt lane was more like a memory of a road, two ruts overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. The car bounced and scraped along, branches dragging against the windows like skeletal fingers. It felt like I was driving into the deep past, into a forgotten corner of the world. And then, as the lane opened into a small clearing, I saw it, the cottage. It was made of dark, weathered stone, mottled with moss and ivy. The slate roof sagged in the middle like a tired old spine. The windows were dark and vacant, and the garden was a wild tangle of thorny bushes and waist-high grass. It wasn't the charming fairy tale cottage of my imagination. It was grim, silent, and looked like it was slowly being reclaimed by the forest. But it was also solid, enduring. It had stood here through seasons of neglect, waiting. I cut the engine, and the silence that rushed in was absolute, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of wind in the trees. For a long moment I just sat there, my hand on the iron key in my pocket. This was it, the lifeboat. It looked more like a shipwreck. A wave of doubt crashed over me. What was I thinking? I was a city girl who didn't know the first thing about fixing a roof or clearing a field. I should have taken the money. But then I looked at the sturdy stone walls, the way Cottage seemed to grow right out of the earth, and I thought of my father. He'd chosen this place for a reason. I got out of the car, the air cool and smelling of damp earth and pine. I walked up the overgrown stone path to the heavy wooden door. The iron key slid into the lock with a grating sound. It resisted at first, stiff from years of disuse, but with a firm twist the mechanism turned with a loud, satisfying clunk. The door swung inward on creaking hinges, opening into a world of shadow and dust. It smelled of cold stone, decaying wood, and time itself. I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold, out of the life that had been stolen from me, and into the one my father had saved. The air inside was thick and still, carrying the scent of a place sealed off from the world. Motes of dust, thick as snowflakes, danced in the single beam of evening light slanting through a grimy window. Everything was draped in white dust sheets, creating a landscape of ghostly, lumpen shapes. It was smaller than I'd imagined. Just one main room with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. A small kitchenette was tucked into one corner, and a narrow staircase led up to what I assumed was a loft bedroom. I pulled a sheet off the nearest shape, revealing a sturdy-looking armchair with faded floral upholstery. I did the same to another, uncovering a heavy oak table. The furniture was simple, rustic, and well-made. It was a place built for function, not for show. It was my father in house form. My eyes were drawn to the stone mantelpiece above the fireplace. Sitting right in the center, untouched by the thickest layers of dust, was a small, carved wooden box, and on top of it the cream-colored envelope with my name on it. My heart started to pound. This was it, the reason for all of it. I crossed the room, my footsteps echoing on the wide plank floors. I picked up the envelope, the paper cool and heavy in my hand. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were several pages, filled with my father's dense, familiar script. I sank into the dusty armchair, took a deep breath to steady myself, and began to read. My dearest Alara, it began, if you are reading this, it means two things. First, that I am gone. For that, my girl, I am endlessly sorry. I hope my passing was peaceful, and I hope you were not alone. Second, it means you have found this place, my secret project, my last-ditch effort, my lifeboat for you. I know you must have 1,000 questions. Why did I never tell you about this cottage? Why all the secrecy? The truth is, I bought this place the year you started dating Mark. I know that will hurt to read. You were so happy then, so full of light and belief in him. And I saw that. I wanted to believe in him too, for your sake. But I also saw something else. I saw the way he looked at things, not at people, but at things. He looked at them with an appraiser's eye, a collector's greed. He saw value, not beauty. He saw assets, not art. And one day, I saw him look at you with that same expression. It was fleeting, just a flicker in his eyes as you talked about your inheritance from your grandmother, but it was there, and it chilled me to the bone. I knew I couldn't tell you. You were in love. You would have seen my concern as judgment, as a father failing to approve of the man his daughter chose. You would have defended him, and it would have driven a wedge between us, the very last thing in the world I ever wanted. So I decided to do the only thing I could think of. I decided to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. I used the small inheritance my own mother left me to buy this cottage. It was a wreck then, even worse than you probably see it now. But the bones were good, the stone was solid. It was on a piece of land that my grandmother had played on as a girl. It felt right. It felt like coming home. Over the next few years, I came up here whenever I could. I told you I was going on fishing trips or academic retreats. I was lying, Alara, and I am sorry for that. But I was here, patching the roof, sanding the floors, making it habitable. I set up the trust with Arthur Davies, a man I trust implicitly, with the strictest instructions. It was to be invisible. It would never be a part of any world you shared with Mark. It was to be your sanctuary, a place he could never know about, could never touch, could never appraise and discard. It was an insurance policy against a disaster I prayed would never happen. I hoped you would never need this place. I hoped you would live a long, happy life with him, and that my fears would prove to be the paranoid ramblings of an overprotective father. I hoped that one day, years from now, I could bring you here myself and we would laugh about my foolishness. If you are reading this, it means my worst fears came true. It means he broke your heart and likely your bank account too. I know his type. They don't just leave, they conquer, they strip everything bare. Know this, Alara, this is not your failure, it is his. You loved with an open heart, that is a strength, not a weakness. Never let him or anyone else convince you otherwise. This cottage is not much, I know. It needs work, it needs life breathed back into it. But it is yours. It is a piece of ground in this world that belongs to no one but you. In the bottom drawer of the desk upstairs, you'll find the original survey maps and some history of this land. You'll also find a little seed money, enough to pay the taxes and get the water turned back on. Use it, stay here, or sell it and start fresh somewhere new. The choice is yours. My only wish is that it gives you one. A choice when you feel like you have none left. I love you more than words can say. Be strong, be brave. Be my daughter. Love, Dad. I finished the letter, and the tears I had been holding back for months finally came. They weren't the hot tears of anger I'd shed over Mark's betrayal, or the numb tears of exhaustion from the legal battles. These were tears of profound, aching grief and overwhelming gratitude. I cried for my father, for the years he'd spent worrying in secret, for the lie he had told to protect me. I cried for his love, a love so fierce and so prescient that it had reached across time and death to catch me. As I fell, he had seen the truth of the man I married long before I had. He hadn't tried to control my choice, but he had refused to let that choice leave me with nothing. He had built me an ark. The letter lay in my lap, the paper soft and wrinkled from my tears. The silence of the cottage no longer felt lonely, it felt protective. It was filled with the lingering presence of my father's love, his labor, his foresight. I could almost feel him in the room, a hand on my shoulder. The anger I felt towards Mark was still there, a hot coal in my gut, but it was different now. It was no longer the all-consuming fire of a victim. It was tempered, hardened into something else. Resolve. My father had given me a choice. Selling the cottage was the sensible option. It was the easy way out. Take the cash, find a small apartment in a new city, and try to forget. But the thought of it felt like a betrayal. It would be like selling the last piece of my father's heart, and it would be letting Mark win. He had taken my home, my money, my dog, my confidence. I couldn't let him, even indirectly, take this too. The last sliver of sunlight faded from the window, plunging the room into a deep twilight. I sat there in the dark, the letter clutched in my hand, and a storm of emotions raged inside me. Grief, anger, guilt, and a terrifying, exhilarating flicker of hope. I was so tired of being a victim, of being acted upon. For the past year, my life had been a series of things being done to me. Legal papers served to me, assets frozen from me, a life taken away from me. My father's letter was a call to action. It was a handing over of a torch. The sheer weight of his sacrifice settled on me. He had spent his weekends, his savings, his peace of mind, all for a future he prayed I would never have to live. How could I turn my back on that? How could I treat his legacy as just another asset to be liquidated? A cold draft snaked across the floor and I shivered. The cottage was a wreck. The roof probably leaked. The plumbing was a mystery. The electricity was off. It was a monumental task, one I was completely unqualified for. The doubt came creeping back in, whispering insidious truths. You can't do this. You're not strong enough. You don't know how. It was Mark's voice in my head, the one he had so carefully cultivated over the years, the one that chipped away at my self-worth until only he was left as the authority on my own capabilities. I stood up, my legs stiff, and felt my way through the darkness to the narrow staircase. I climbed the creaking steps to the loft. It was a single, large room under the slanted roof, with a simple bed frame in the center and a small wooden desk tucked under the eaves. I ran my hands over the dusty surface of the desk until I found the handle of the bottom drawer. It was stuck fast. I wiggled it, pulled harder, and it finally gave way with a groan of protest. Inside, just as the letter had promised, was a bundle of papers tied with twine, the maps and history. And underneath them was a thick brown envelope. I lifted it out. It was heavy, far heavier than paper. My fingers fumbled with the clasp. I pulled it open and tipped the contents onto the desk. Bundles of cash held together with old rubber bands cascaded onto the dusty wood. I stared. My eyes wide in the gloom. I started counting, my hands shaking. Hundreds, 50s, 20s. It wasn't a fortune, but it was far more than just seed money. There was almost $10,000, enough for the taxes, enough for the utilities, enough for lumber and paint and tools, enough for food for months, enough to give me a real fighting chance. My father, the frugal history teacher, had been saving this for me, bill by bill, for years. This wasn't just money, it was time, it was possibility, it was a foundation. At that moment, something inside me shifted, a tectonic plate of my soul grinding into a new position. The whispers of doubt in my head went silent. The choice was no longer a choice. It was a duty. It was an honor. I would not sell. I would not run. I would stay. I would rebuild. Both the cottage and myself. This place wasn't my father's legacy. It was my own, and it was time to claim it. The very next morning, I drove back into Haven's Crest. The town felt different in the bright morning light. Less lonely, more peaceful. My first stop was the county clerk's office, a small, musty room in the same building as the post office. I paid the delinquent taxes in cash. The clerk, a woman with a kind face and a cascade of gray hair, stamped my receipt with a satisfying thud. "Welcome back to the books, Blackwood Cottage," she said with a smile. It felt like the first official act of my new life. My next stop was the general store. The old man, whose name I learned was Henry, helped me pick out the basics. A heavy-duty flashlight, work gloves, buckets, sponges, and a propane canister for the old stove. I also bought groceries, bread, cheese, coffee, canned soup, simple sustaining food. As I paid, he looked at me, his gaze direct but not unkind. "You planning on staying a while then?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and the word felt solid, real. "I am. I'm going to fix it up." He nodded slowly, a small smile touching his lips. "Your father would like that," he said. "He loved that old place. Said it had good bones." Back at the cottage, the work began. The first few days were a brutal education in the realities of neglect. I started by just letting the light in. I scrubbed the years of grime from the inside of the windows, the muscles in my arms and back screaming in protest. With every clean pane, the dark, gloomy interior brightened, revealing the true character of the space, the warm tones of the wood floors, the intricate grain of the ceiling beams. Then I tackled the dust. I pulled all the ghostly sheets off the furniture and beat them outside until clouds of dust billowed into the air. I swept and mopped the floors, the water in the bucket turning black again and again. It was exhausting, monotonous, physical labor, and it was the most therapeutic thing I had ever done. Every bit of dirt I scrubbed away felt like clearing out a piece of the pain and humiliation of the past year. I wasn't just cleaning a house, I was reclaiming my life, 1 square foot at a time. I discovered the cottage's rhythm. In the mornings, I worked, fueled by strong coffee and a sense of purpose. In the afternoons, I would sit on the front step, eating a simple lunch, and study the land. I learned the way the sun moved across the clearing, the names of the birds that sang in the trees, the path a family of deer took through the woods every evening. The profound sense of the forest, which had at first felt intimidating, became a comforting blanket. It was a silence that allowed me to finally hear my own thoughts again, clear and free from the noise of my old life and Mark's constant, subtle manipulations. One afternoon, a battered pickup truck rumbled up the lane. An older woman with a practical haircut and dirt under her fingernails got out. "You must be Alara," she said, her voice raspy. "I'm Martha. Your neighbor from over the ridge. Henry at the store told me you were here. Said you were Miller's girl." She looked the cottage up and down, then looked at me, taking in my city clothes now covered in dust and sweat. "Heard you're fixing the place up. That roof is your first problem. We're due for a storm next week." I must have looked panicked because she let out a short, barking laugh. "Don't you worry. My son Jake is a roofer. I'll send him over tomorrow to take a look. He'll give you a fair price. We look out for our own around here." I was stunned by the casual, unconditional offer of help. In the city, my neighbors were strangers I occasionally nodded to in the elevator. Here, community seemed to be a verb, an action. True to her word, Jake arrived the next day. He was a quiet, capable young man who confirmed the roof was in bad shape but salvageable. He quoted me a price that was shockingly reasonable. He said he could use some of the original slates and salvage the rest from a collapsed barn nearby. While he worked on the roof over the next week, I kept cleaning, organizing, and exploring. In the desk, I found my father's journals from his time here. They weren't diaries of feelings, but logs of his work. Replaced 3 floorboards by the hearth, sealed the north-facing window frame, planted the daffodil bulbs by the stone wall. I found those very daffodils, now a thick clump of green shoots, and felt a fresh wave of connection to him. He hadn't just bought a property, he had poured his love into its very foundations. Then, one evening, my phone, which I'd charged in town, buzzed with an email. The sender was Mark's lawyer. My blood ran cold. "It has come to our attention." The email read that a previously undisclosed asset, a property in Haven's Crest, has been claimed by you. As this was not declared during the divorce proceedings, we hereby state our client's claim to 50% of its assessed value. We advise you to contact us immediately to arrange for an appraisal and liquidation. The legal jargon was a smokescreen for the raw, petty greed beneath. He had found out. Somehow he had found me. The old panic, the feeling of being hunted, clawed at my throat. But then I looked around the room at the clean floors and the sunlight glinting off the furniture my father had built. I thought of the new slates on the roof and the daffodils waiting to bloom. This wasn't an asset. This was my home. I took a deep breath, forwarded the email to Mr. Davies with a simple note, "Please handle this." Then I turned off my phone, went outside, and sat on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear, dark sky. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time I knew I was on solid ground. A few days later, Mr. Davies called. His voice was calm and measured, but I could hear a note of satisfaction in it. "Good morning, Alara. I've spoken with Mark's attorney. I have explained to him, in no uncertain terms, the legal structure of the blind trust your father established. I have provided him with the documentation, proving the asset was transferred to you as a sole and separate inheritance prior to your marriage and was legally shielded from any community property claims. In short, I told him to go pound sand. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And he has no legal leg to stand on. It was a bluff, a tactic to intimidate you into giving up something you are not required to give. They will not be pursuing the matter, you are clear." I sank onto the front steps of the cottage, my legs suddenly weak with relief. "Thank you, Arthur, thank you. Your father did all the work, Alara," he said, and for the first time I heard real warmth in his voice. "I'm just the messenger." He was a remarkable man. He built you a fortress, that's what it was, not just of stone and wood, but of legal foresight and paternal love. Mark couldn't touch me here. His world of financial aggression and legal maneuvering had no power in this place. The victory felt quiet but monumental. It wasn't about defeating him. It was about realizing he no longer had any control over me. His chapter in my life was well and truly over. The last of his ghosts had been exorcised. Months melted into a season. Spring arrived in Haven's Crest with a gentle, persistent greening. The daffodils my father had planted erupted in a riot of cheerful yellow along the old stone wall. I started a small vegetable garden in the patch of earth Jake had helped me till. I learned the satisfaction of pulling a carrot from the soil, of eating a tomato still warm from the sun. The work on the cottage continued, slow and steady. I learned how to plaster a wall, how to reglaze a window, how to sand and refinish a floor until it glowed. My hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused and capable. I felt stronger, not just physically, but in my very core. I was no longer the broken woman who had fled the city. I was a builder, a restorer. My life found a new rhythm, one dictated by the sun and the seasons, not by a calendar of social obligations and corporate deadlines. I made friends in town. Henry from the store would save the day-old newspapers for me. Martha would drop by with a jar of her famous blackberry jam. I joined the town's volunteer library group, helping to sort and shelve books one afternoon a week. I learned the stories of the people who lived here, their histories intertwined with the mountains and valleys. I was becoming part of the fabric of this place, no longer an outsider. I was home. One crisp autumn evening, I built a fire in the great stone fireplace for the first time. The logs crackled and hissed, filling the small cottage with warmth and the smell of wood smoke. I sat in the armchair my father had sat in, a cup of tea warming my hands, and looked around the room. The walls were painted a soft, warm white. The floors gleamed. The simple furniture was clean and polished. Through the window, I could see the moon rising over the dark silhouette of the trees. It was a simple life, a quiet life, and it was entirely my own. I thought about the concept of inheritance. I used to think it was about money, about property, about the things you are given, but now I knew better. My father's true inheritance wasn't the cottage or the cash he'd left me. It was the lesson embedded in its stone walls. The lesson that you can build a sanctuary in the middle of a storm. That true wealth is not what you own, but the strength you have to start again. He hadn't just given me a house, he had given me back to myself. The woman I was before Mark, the one who loved sunsets and believed in things, she wasn't gone. She had just been waiting here for me all along. This place wasn't an escape from my old life. It was a return to my real one. This cottage, these 5 acres of wild land, they weren't just a shelter. They became my entire world, and in doing so, they taught me what the word home really means. It's not 4 walls and a roof. It's not expensive furniture or a prestigious address. Home is the place where you can be utterly and completely yourself. It's the place where your past is understood and your future feels possible. For me, it was this small stone building, soaked in the quiet, fierce love of a father who saw the storm coming and built a lighthouse instead of just teaching me how to swim. He knew I already knew how to swim. He just wanted to make sure I had a shore to swim to. And that's the thing about hitting rock bottom, isn't it? It feels like an ending, it feels final, but sometimes, rock bottom is the most solid ground you'll ever stand on. It's the foundation you can build a new life upon, a life that is stronger, more authentic, and more truly yours than the one you lost. This story, my story, it isn't really about a divorce or a hidden inheritance. It's about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It's about the quiet ways that love can protect us, even from beyond the grave. It's about finding out that you are stronger than you ever thought possible. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this space with me. Maybe my story resonates with a part of your own. Maybe you've had a moment in your life where everything fell apart, and you had to find that one solid piece of ground to stand on. What was your stone cottage? What was the thing, the place, the person, the memory, the hidden strength inside you that you held on to when everything else was gone? I would be honored if you would share a piece of your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I believe, with all my heart, that sharing our stories of survival is how we help each other heal. It's how we know we're not alone in the fight. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe in second chances and the power of starting over, consider subscribing to this channel and becoming part of our community. We're all just trying to find our way home, and maybe we can help each other by sharing our maps. This was the end of one chapter of my life, but it was the true beginning of the one that mattered.
Catch knows these, Dino. I think it's because they want to try and eliminate like code errors. So they only provide some letters in like the outputs. Like you can put zeros in, but you can't put like O's, you know? Also, hi Mocha Bunny. Good to see you. Have you seen the Dream Island that has everything set up like a store? I have, Tristan. It's crazy. Okay, this is an arcade. Ah, okay, perfect. What kind of table are they using here? It's like, do they have a gaming table or is this just like just an industrial desk? Interesting. Okay. Okay, there we go. So let's go check out some of the trees here. Because we do need more berry trees. Oh, perfect. Spare. I think we have a chesto, so we're good. Frost. Oh, this is a lum berry tree. Is this Pokemon Snap? Yes. Owzers, it is. Still not as good as the OG one, but it'll do for now. Okay, so we're still missing like an Oranberry, I think, but... hey Des. Have a good lurk. Okay. I love the OG Snap when Pikachu was like 12 pixels in the dream. Me too. Especially when that 12 pixel Pikachu had balloons tied to it. Is it that good? I've heard really good things. It's amazing, Nelly. I thought you were serious. I was like, this is not Pokemon Snap. I'm sorry, Seamus. I miss Fat Pikachu. Me too, Cat. Honestly, justice for Fat Pikachu. What do we need? Oh yeah, we need to go to Rocky Ridges. It's actually a Minecraft mod.